Very well planned. All right, here we are. We're live. Woohoo! Jonny looking like a beer can. So fitting. All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We are doing our tasting tonight of our Newbarns Oat Lager, and we've got Jonny Hamilton, a brewer there, to talk us through everything about the beer and the brewery. So what we're going to do in the next half an hour is start with a little bit of the running order. So I'll talk you through what to expect. And then we'll go ahead and get stuck into our tasting and our chat. So first up, Jonny and I are going to introduce ourselves. Then we will do our tasting, so no one needs to wait too long to get stuck into the beer. Hopefully you're tasting along with us. Then we're going to talk through the beer itself and sort of how it's made, what's unique about it, what is an oat lager. Then we'll move into talking about Newbarns. They're a relatively new brewery, but with lots of experienced folks behind the brewery. So Jonny can get to tell their story and the beers that they brew, and then we want to hear your questions. So please feel free to ask on whatever platform you're watching on, whether you're with us on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram. Type your questions there as a comment, and they will come to us so we can ask Jonny and get some answers for you. So in terms of who we are, my name's Nat. I am a beer educator, beer sommelier, advanced cicerone. I teach people about beer for a living. And I've recently founded my own virtual beer school. So if you want to learn more about beer at home, you can come join me. But the reason I host these tastings for Mother Kelly's is because I got my start in beer at Mother Kelly's 5 years ago. So they've had me come back, and we've done these great lockdown chats with breweries across the UK to talk about what they're up to, taste one of their beers, etc. So we've got another one in store for you tonight. Jonny, who are you?
I'm Jonny Hamilton. I am a brewer here at Newbarns. It's just the four of us, so I guess at the moment I brew most of the beer, but we all kind of take it in turns to do everything with a small team of four. And I guess I'm also going to plug, I also run a publication called Pellicle, since you're asking who I am.
So. Yeah, exactly. And do you want to tell us a bit about your background before Newbarns as well?
Yeah, so I actually moved back to Edinburgh a year ago, but I lived in Edinburgh between 2008 and 2016, where I studied chemistry, and then I studied my master's in brewing and distilling here, and then worked for a small brew pub called the Hanging Bat in town. And then in 2016, I moved down to Beavertown, where I was there until last August. So nearly 4 years. I started as a brewer there, and then a senior brewer, and then ran the Tempest project for over 2.5 years, specializing in mixed fermentation and barrel aging. So we had about 300 barrels, and we're putting out sour beers, wild mixed fermentation stuff, which is very different to what we're doing here at Newbarns. But it's really nice to be back in Edinburgh the past year, and it's always where I wanted to be.
Nice. Well, I'm very keen to hear whether you do intend to bring some of that sour and wild stuff to Newbarns. Of course, it takes years to build up a sour program, so we'll come back to that and see if that is something on the radar in the future. So let's go ahead and start with our tasting then. Hopefully everybody's got a can of oat lager if you're tasting at home with us. I've already got mine pre-poured and cheated a little bit, started on the tasting, as Jonny did when we were in the green room before we came in here. So anytime I do a beer tasting, I forgot to show off my fabulous t-shirt. So I'll do that for everyone, since you can start to see it. In keeping with the theme for this evening, Jonny looks like the beer can, and I have my lager t-shirt on from Lost and Grounded. So yes, we are lager lovers here today. So let's talk about the tasting. So as a beer sommelier, I'm very keen to make sure that when we look at a beer, we look at all aspects of it. And so for me, that means, what does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? And what does it feel like? So I'm going to talk through my version of those 4 points for this particular beer, and then go to Jonny for his, as he's the guy behind it, to see if he's picked up on anything different or describes it in a different way. So for me, we've got a lovely gold beer with a slight haze. It's not too hazy. I had a can yesterday, and it was a little bit hazier. But I think for me, there's just a little bit of chill haze here, so it's pretty cold, fresh out of the fridge. And on the nose, important to give your beer a swirl to really pick up more of the aroma. As we shake out the bubbles, then we're bringing out more of the aroma molecules too. So giving this a swirl, I get a really nice sort of subtle fruit character, which is definitely unusual for a lager, kind of more Kolsch-like. So a little bit of apple, maybe a little bit of peach, and then a little bit of spice as well from the hops in there. I'm assuming from the hops, but we'll find out. And then on the palate, very clean, that nice clean lager character. A little bit of graininess, like that sort of oatmeal taste, definitely a little hint of porridge and grain. And then more of that spice builds up, more of that bitterness builds up, and then a little bit more of that fruit, that subtle fruit character kind of creeps up in the finish as well. My favorite thing for me, though, about the beer is really the mouthfeel. I think the texture is really soft, it's really rounded, and I'm assuming that's from the oats and the wheat that it contains. But it gives it this nice sort of softened finish where there is bitterness, yes, but it doesn't taste too sort of bracingly bitter. So, Jonny, what do you think? How would you assess it? What's your tasting of the beer?
So yeah, most of that is kind of what we were hoping to achieve with this beer. So when we started talking about recipes for Newbarns, it was probably about a year and a half ago in Gordon and Emma's flat and Fred's flat. They all lived together in Dalston. And we sat down and we kind of went through the beers, and we always knew we wanted to do 2 lagers and 2 pale ales. And that we knew we wanted to do a classic Pilsner style, about 4%, which is our Pilsner beer. We knew we wanted to do the tail beer and the pale ale. So those were kind of sorted. And we kind of started talking about what beers we like. And obviously with Scotland, we're kind of blessed with great agriculture. And the name of the brewery comes from Emma's family farm in Angus. So Newbarns is first and foremost a farm, which is mainly a cattle farm, but also grows some barley, some oats, and some wheat.
Okay.
So we kind of wanted to focus on the agricultural element of beer, because people tend to forget that, not forget, but I feel that people don't really talk about how beer is an agricultural product.
I think forget's a very fair word in that situation.
I think this beer is kind of it's an evolution, so it will become more clear over years, this beer. But yeah, the plan was like we've got great malts and great agriculture in Scotland, including at the farm the brewery's named after, and we've got great hops in the UK. So we kind of started working around that idea. So we ended up with using quite a rustic kind of base of, so it's actually 60% malted barley, and then the other 40% is a breakdown between flaked barley, malted oats, and wheat malt. And that's kind of like changes depending on, I mean, we're a small brewery, so like we mainly use Simpson's malt, but you can see behind me, this is all mirrored. We use various other maltsters that we have like within a 50-mile radius. So we've got some malt from Crafty Maltster, which is in Fife, and we've used wheat and Pilsner malt from Mungus Wells, which is in East Lothian. We've used crisp malt in Alloa. So we've just got great maltsters up here and great barley, and so we wanted to showcase that in a kind of lager style. And then the hops, these are all from Brookhouse Farms in Herefordshire. So the hops in this are Admiral and Challenger, and it's actually our most like hoppy beer in terms of like hop side. So it's hopped at 10 kilos in the Whirlpool in a 20 hect batch, which is like double what we do for the pale ale, tail beer, and the pills. So it's quite a hoppy lager.
Yeah, right. Especially as most people would expect the pale ale and the table beer to have more hops than you would in a lager.
Yeah, we still struggle with like our naming of our beers. Like we called it an oat lager, but it has no more oats than it has wheat. I feel the oats is the kind of interesting part of it that you don't really get in lager. And but yeah, you're right. Like totally fruitier than our pills. That I think comes from the slightly warmer fermentation temperature. So our Pilsner, we start at like 10, 11 degrees Celsius, which is kind of more typical lagering fermentation. This we ferment at like 2 degrees warmer, so about 12 degrees Celsius. And just that small difference can make like a huge difference in the aroma. So like we get a lot more, like you said, apple. We get this compact, like this flavor in like technical brewing chat, it's called ethyl hexanoate, but it's like quite a common like fermentation characteristic, often in a lot of different styles. It's a huge characteristic in best bitter. So like Harvey's Best from in Sussex is a huge, like that red apple thing is a huge part of their beer. But you also get it in whiskey. You also get it in in Belgian beers. So we've actually managed to get that come through quite a lot in the beer. Occasionally we get a tiny bit of isoamyl acetate, which is banana, but I don't get so much of it, and I'm quite happy because I don't really like that in lager.
Yeah, right. That's what we would find in a German wheat beer, and I think a lot of people wouldn't be so keen to find that in their lager.
Yeah, but the bitterness it's our most bitter beer, like we've made so far, and yeah, so it's more bitter than Pils, which is odd because a pill should be like your most bitter lager style, and it's more bitter than the pale and the table beer. So it's an odd beer. It's probably our strangest. It's our strangest beer, and we always knew it was going to be the toughest seller, even though we found that most times we've done chats like this or we've had coverage for the brewery, people are really interested in the Oat Lager, which is unusual because we thought no one would be interested in it.
Well, it's unique and different, so we want to know the story.
Yeah, so it kind of we come up with the idea of making it, but we didn't really know what it tasted like until we got the cans from Burnt Mill. So yeah, obviously with what happened with the brewery, we ended up brewing this beer elsewhere before we brewed it here. And it's just been an evolution of kind of figuring out over time how it's meant to taste. And I think this batch, which is when we're both drinking, is as close to what we thought in our head the beer would taste like, which has got elements of things we really like. So lager, best bitter, that kind of fruitier, like appley notes. And then one of our favorite beers, one of our favorite breweries that was a big inspiration to us is De La Seine in Brussels. So one of our favorite beers, Taras Bulba, was always kind of something we talked about. That beer is an ale, but kind of has this bitterness that you'd associate with a really bitter Pils. And it was something we always enjoyed about that beer, was how like raspingly bitter it was. And it's not quite as like Taras is much more bitter than this. Mm-hmm. Their New Zenit Pils is kind of more in this category. We actually tasted that for the first time a few weeks ago and compared it to the Oat Lager, and it was quite similar. So yeah,
I do like as well that it is definitely a lager, as you've said, but it's got all of these unique characteristics that most people think lager and they think very clean, very easy drinking, and it is definitely that. But just simply by using a lager yeast at slightly warmer temperatures for the fermentation, we get this interesting ester character to give it that light fruitiness. Just by mixing the malt bill up, you get that nice soft mouthfeel that kind of blunts the bitterness, so it's not too bitter. And then you use these interesting UK hops. So tell me a bit about the hops. It's Challenger and Admiral, is that right? And so they're grown in the UK. What flavors are you expecting from the hops?
So the UK thing was mainly because I don't think we would have used UK hops in this had we not had Brookhouse in the UK. I think this kind of resurgence of, well, I guess agriculture and being taken seriously in the same respect that we've got people like Mungo's Wells and we've got crafty maltsters who are making really good malt. We saw a bit in the States, like when you've got the growth of craft beer, and then you've got after that the growth of like small scale maltsters and people who are kind of taking it back to, okay, if the raw material is really good, then then the beer is going to be even better. So UK hops kind of got a bad rep around the world, and especially with craft breweries in the UK, we always hear the same kind of stories, like full of twigs. Twiggy's quite a common like characteristic you hear mentioned. You always hear stories of people getting like loads of sticks and stuff in their hop bales, and it wasn't really taken like seriously. And people like Brookhouse are processing the hops really, really well. So I'm just saying a question thing, and I'll get to it in a second. But yeah, they're taking their processing of hops really seriously, so that we get their pellets, so the hops are pelletized, but they just are miles above stuff that I've been using in the past. So the Admiral, typically with Admiral, like that I've used in the past, I get quite like an orange kind of characteristic, like quite bitter orange rinds. And Challenger, I guess, is more earthy, but like maybe some berry characteristics. But the stuff that's coming out from those guys, like they've got some UK grown Chinook, and a few other things that they're working on. And it's the same with not to go off topic, but the German hops we're using in our Pilsner, we're getting direct from the farm over there, a hop called Kalista. And we've been using it in our latest batch of pills, and it's almost too hoppy in tank. Like, it smells like Citra or something like that. It's insane.
Oh, wow.
And it's crazy just when you, like, the beers we're making aren't crazy in terms of like what we're doing. They're all between 3 and 4.8%, although we've got some specials coming out. But what we are trying to do is focus on the best materials we can get. So that means if we can get hops direct from the farm, the fresher the better. And if we can go drive and pick up malt in Fife, that's only a few days after being malted. And it's just those little differences, I think, are kind of what we're about, which is good quality raw materials and kind of showcasing them. So, yeah.
I like it. The farm theme just shows through in everything that you're doing. You want to make sure that you get the right malts. You want to get the right hops. So let's talk a bit about the yeast, since that was the question that came in from Matt. Is this brewed with a normal lager yeast?
Yeah, it's the same yeast as our Pilsner. So it's we use a yeast strain called 3470, which is just like, it's a dry lager yeast. It's a lot of these yeasts all have different names, but they all kind of trace back to a very similar strain. Some call it like Augustiner strain. White Labs call it 833. Fermenters call it 3470, but they're all very similar. Quite clean, low acid aldehyde. Like, yeah, they don't produce many off flavors. So it's a pretty simple fermenting lager strain. It's not super crazy. Yeah.
It really is just the temperature difference that changed its expression.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see how, if we took this, to see if these differences are mainly due to the difference in malt bill or hops, or if it's because of the fermentation temperature. But I mean, we fermented our last batch of pills in tank a degree colder, and it fermented so much slower. It's like literally 1 degree with these things can make such a huge difference. And if we fermented it even warmer at 14 degrees rather than 12, like 13, it would be even more estery and even more fruity.
Yeah, so it's just about getting that balance right so that each of the ingredients can play their part and not have one overwhelm the other in that sense. Okay, so let's talk a bit then about Newbarns more broadly. So you only got started as a brewery. You've been in talks for a little while, but got started earlier this year and definitely faced some challenges, unfortunately, with COVID. So go back to those early conversations between yourself, Gordon, Emma, and Freddie. Tell us the idea for the brewery, how it got started, and how you've gotten to where you are now with that slight hurdle in getting the brewery itself set up in Edinburgh.
So I think that the brewery plans kind of got started for Gordon and Emma in 2018. So they'd always planned, well, I don't think it was on their like grand plan, but the idea at the back of their head was to open a brewery of their own one day. And I don't know if it was to open it so soon, but Gordon's really good at industrial auctions, and he's constantly on eBay. He came across a brew kit that you can see over my shoulder, which was a pilot plant that was used in Burton for what is now Molson Coors. So it's a 20 hectoliter brew kit. It's actually 5 vessel, and it was on there as a complete steal. And because it's an industrial auction, a lot of people aren't really looking at it. So a lot of breweries in the UK in the kind of craft sector use the SIVA forums for finding stuff all the time. Whereas these industrial auctions, often the reserve price is kind of like never met, or like people aren't there to buy a brew kit, they're there to buy a specific thing. So Gordon ended up putting in a bid and winning this 20 hectoliter 5 vessel brew house in 2018 for a very, very, very good price. And it kind of sat on the farm for a while. while we planned the brewery. And yeah, so I wasn't involved at the time. I was at Finefest in 2018 and got talking to Gordon and Emma and basically kind of insinuated that I was planning to move back to Scotland at some point in the future, and if there was room for another person, that I'd be very keen to join. And yeah, I think start of 2019, we started looking at sites in Edinburgh, and it was pretty bleak, to be honest. Turns out finding an industrial site in Edinburgh, especially in the city centre, is very difficult. We really wanted to open in Leith. It had like none of us. I'd never lived in Leith, and I've lived in Edinburgh before, but the vibe and the kind of ethos of people in Leith is very like the slogan of Leith is persevere, which is actually a really good thing to remember for this year. So we eventually found a site in May last year, and we moved in October last year. And since then, it's just been like constantly working on the brewery. So Gordon and Emma did a lot of the work with Fred, and we were all working like different part-time jobs. And then I think the plan was eventually to get gas work done in April this year, which would mean that we could finally brew. So everything was in place. We had the flooring done, we had the drains done, the tanks were in January, the brew kit was in. All we needed was the gas from the streets to be pumped into to feed the steam generator. And because of the lockdown and the pandemic, basically Scottish Gas Network wouldn't complete the work because it was deemed not essential. So we had everything in place to brew in March, April, but we couldn't. So we kind of put our heads together and had some friends help us out. So we brewed our first beers under contract, I guess, which is not how we ever saw starting the company. We brewed 2 beers at the Colonel, which is where Gordon and Emma used to work, for about 5-6 years each. And we brewed the pale on the table there, and then we brewed the Oat Lager we're drinking now. We brewed the first batch of that at Burnt Mill in Suffolk. So yeah, and then in the summer we still hadn't got gas, and we hadn't got any idea of when we would get gas. So during that period we would drive to Fife, which is about an hour drive from here. Actually, I'm drinking from the glass, but our friends at Tuttle, Stephen and Lucy, let us use their brew kits, and we would brew work there, put it into IBC, drive it back to Edinburgh, pump it into tank, ferment it here, and then when we got our canning line, we were able to can. And then at the end of August, we finally got gas, and then since August we've been brewing, fermenting, and packaging at Newbarns in Leith.
Woohoo! Finally.
It started with like brewed, fermented, and packaged elsewhere, and then finally it was brewed elsewhere, fermented, and packaged here, and then finally now we can say that everything we do is brewed, fermented, and packaged at Newbarns Brewery.
It's actually done by you guys. Yeah, that's great. And I want to remind everyone, we've only got a few minutes left, so if you've got questions, put them as comments wherever you're watching, and we will get those over to Jonny. But I wanted to ask, so of course now you're brewing in your own place, thank goodness, and fermenting and packaging, as you've said. You hinted at this a little bit. Everything you do is pretty sessionable, pretty low ABV. You've got the pale ale, the table beer, your Pilsner, and the Oat Lager. Should we expect more beers from you? Is it all about that core range and specials? Are you going to change up that core range? Are you going to do your sour and mixed firm stuff? What's on the plan?
So yeah, the whole plan was beers that were meant for the pub. So even though we aren't able to go to the pub, most of us in the UK right now, the beers we're mainly focusing on the 4 beers. So yeah, the Oat Lager, the Pils, the table beer, and the pale. The pale and the table change hops pretty much every time. We might revert back, so like we've done Mosaic twice now, and the table beer. But the lagers are just kind of an evolution of trying to protect these recipes. And then specials wise, we've got our first specials coming out soon. We've got I was going to say imperial stout. We've got a big strong stout. We don't really know how we're going to call these beers yet, but yeah, it's 11% stout. So I guess imperial stout.
Well, how fitting. We literally just had a question come through. Is there a stout on the horizon? So whoever asked that, you got the answer you wanted.
Well, there's actually 2 stouts on the horizon. So we brewed the big one a few weeks ago, which will be packaged next week. And then we brewed last Wednesday, Thursday, we brewed like a 5% stout, which is just super simple. Again, like everything's kind of stripped back. So just 1 hop and 3 malts. So it's, flaked barley, roasted barley, and malted barley. And a little bit of low colored chocolate from crisp malting. And that's just like a 5% stout that's made for everyday kind of drinking. And then the big one is like super intense. It's no adjuncts, like it's not really our style. So again, it's 5 malts, some sugar, yeast, and 1 hop. But with that, we like tasted through all the malt range that we could get from Simpsons, and we picked out like what we thought was delicious. So like literally, it kind of comes back to tasting the raw ingredients and being like, we like these flavors, and let's build the beer around that rather than anything else.
And then is that you making a hop malt tea to taste the flavors of the malt, or you're actually just eating the grains themselves and kind of?
We've tried making some sort of teas in the past, but realistically, we're just like munching on the raw grain.
Okay.
And so I think for that big stout, it was like Munich as a base, and then some extra dark crystals and dark crystal roast barley and chocolate malt. And yeah, we don't want to go too much more than that. And then in terms of just another question, in terms of mixed fermentation, there's no plan to do that on site here in anytime soon, but there is plans to do something on the farm. So with Emma's family farm, Newbarns, the plan is to have maybe some barrels up there in the future, and they grow some fruits. They grow like damsons and apples. So it will be very much like if we do it, it will be because we have that. We have the accessibility to get to those things. So like same with Dundee, like this area is really good for growing raspberries. So like if we do a fruit sour, it would be using raspberries, for example.
Nice. Well, Jonny had a laugh because the next question that came in was, is yellow your favorite color? And I think it is, just because he's trying to style. It's like Halloween. You're styling just like the can, but maybe yellow is your favorite color.
I would say it's not my favorite color, but I mean, it had to be done for this evening. But yeah, it also matches the Newbarns. Oh my God, this color in the background too.
You're perfectly on brand. I have one more question for you, and we'll keep an eye on the chat to see what else comes in. You mentioned previously that, of course, you lived in Edinburgh when you were at school at Harriet-Watt and then working there before you came down to London. But what's it been like returning to the Edinburgh beer scene? What have you got to report about what's going on up there?
It's very odd because obviously we moved up. We all drove up in September last year, and then for a lot of time it was us kind of. Well, actually, we ended up working, a lot of us, in the scene, some of us for the first time. So I used to work in bottle shops here in the past, and ended up working at little off-license in Portobello called Beer Zoo, which is great. And they sell a lot of our beer now, which is really cool. And I worked at like a wine shop and bar called Spry. And Emma was working at Bottle, which is where we brewed our first beers in Fife. And then she was working at the Portobello tap out in Portobello too. So it's been cool. A big change from London. It's a much smaller scene. Like we pretty much every day at the brewery, because if the shutters open, we see people that we know walk past, and it's great. We have a little shop on Saturdays now, and yeah, it's just the same faces and new faces every time. It's really nice. But we haven't really had the opportunity to really explore the pub scene with our own beers yet, which is hard. We've got some of our favorite pubs in Edinburgh that we want to sell to and we will sell to, but yeah, there's been minimal enjoyment of our own beer in bars. We've had we've got a bar in the corner called Mother Superior, which is kind of our local, and they sell a lot of our beer. And when we had people visiting, we'd take them there during the summer and sit outside. And yeah, that's pretty much been it so far. There's a few other places in town, but yeah, hopefully next year a lot more drinking of our own beers in pubs, which is the point of the brewery. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I can imagine, as you've said, the whole idea was beer for the pub, and we can't actually drink it in a pub. All the more reason to, as you said, as the people of Leaf do, persevere so that you can then be able to drink your beers in the pub in the future. So we'll go to one last question. Can we access that playlist on Spotify? So maybe more people can hear your music than I thought. I can't hear it anymore.
I didn't even think, I forgot the music was playing. No, it was an album. It wasn't even a playlist. It was an album called Plantasia, if anyone wants to look it up. It's for helping your plants grow.
That's awesome. So many fun facts here. Okay, perfect. Well, we've just hit half an hour, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up, unless you have any last things you want to say. Jonny, anything you missed that you want to tell us about the brewery, the beers?
No, just keep drinking the beers and enjoying them. And we're really happy with how the beers are tasting right now, and we're kind of only just hitting the strides of what we're hoping to achieve with the beers in the future. And yeah, we're getting really good feedback, and thanks. People just keep giving their feedback and keep supporting the brewery. It's great. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for joining us. So yeah, one last look. There's the can, the Newbarns Oat Lager Beer. So if you haven't tried it yet, do definitely go seek it out. So I just want to say thanks very much to Jonny for joining us. And you can keep up with Newbarns at Newbarns Brewery on social media and see what they're up to. If you live locally, of course, stop by and get some beers. You guys have a great list of your stockists on the website. But then, of course, if you want to order online, well, if you can get to shops, you can get to Mother Kelly's M16, their shop in Stoke Newington. That one is open during this lockdown, and you can stock up there if you live in London. Otherwise, order on motherkellys.co.uk and you can have it shipped to you. Keep up with Mother Kelly's on social at mother_Kellys, or each different site has its own account. And I'm Beer With Nat. So yeah, that's all we got for you today. Thank you so much for being with us, Jonny, for telling us all about Newbarns, and hopefully everyone will now go out and buy it if they haven't tasted it. And then everyone can dress in all yellow as they drink it too. I think that's a must now.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye, everybody. See you soon.